Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the SoapyRao show. Today, I'm joined by someone very special, a person who I can call a friend, who I met recently. We got chatting, and that resulted in very, very heavy phone bills. But no, not really, because we used WhatsApp, so it was free. But she's an amazing person. We got chatting about a lot of things, from her life to my life, from disability rights to inclusivity, I was going to say. And of course, she's Lauren Freedman, the host of the Uninvisible Pod, a very important and interesting podcast for the times we live in. So, Lauren, welcome to the SoapyRao show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. It's such a pleasure to be on the show and to be having another one of our deep chats, deep cuts from our conversation. So I'm very excited to get into it with you.
Amazing. No, I'm so glad that things are possible in these times where people are reaching out beyond their geographies. You know, what I've noticed is one way, if you are only sort of getting your live feed from social media, you feel that everyone's in these little clusters hating on each other. But if you actually just sort of, switch off social media for a minute or so, that's all it takes. You realize that there is a world out there and there are people who are willing and who want to reach and connect and communicate and share ideas across the globe. And I think when people said globalization and its true power, this is it. So sadly, while there is an entire world of turmoil and being split on either end of the spectrum when it comes to politics or identity, there are a few of us slipping within the cracks. I don't think they anticipated that.
I think that's true. It's the real change happens underneath all of those layers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing.
I to start with, I want to talk about your podcast, but I really like the name Uninvisible Pod. But
Thank you.
before we get to that particular thing, I want to find out how you are and how your life, how did you get to where you are, your story about why you did the podcast and do the podcast. And I think maybe just to start with, how's the lockdown changed your life as an American with your condition over the past year or so? Because the reason I ask as an American is because, in India, we are kind of used to some amount of chaos because of our numbers, because of the population. So, of course, the lockdown, COVID, and the pandemic did shake things up. And sadly, a lot of people were affected. A lot of people lost their lives. But I feel because of the kind of life we live in India, we are always anticipating something. But I feel being in America, living there for a few years, there's a lot more importance given to process and kind of life goes on without thinking too much. But this really
I'm glad you think so.
At least it seems like that from the outside, Yeah. Like you can go get your coffee at Starbucks, you can go do, it's happening here now, the change in India, but it's very predictable in some ways, right? You go to the grocery store, there's a lot of abundance and there's a lot of stuff which is available on call. But that was at its core, if you want to call that its core, shaken up. So how was that for you?
It's been strange times, that's for sure. I have to say, in many ways, this has been a time of emotional expansion because there's been so much space for so many of us to look into ourselves, right? So there's been an opportunity in all of that. And not only to look into ourselves from the perspective of having space and figuring can I curse on the show? Figuring our shit out.
Yeah. But, just like a sailor.
Oh, excellent. Oh, great. I knew I was in good company. But so there hasn't only been that opportunity, but also it's in the wake of this massive tragedy. So it's this very weird, traumatic time that I think so many of us are living through. And I'll say from my perspective, it's been really frightening because I have an autoimmune disease. I have a bunch of different diagnoses, but that's the one that's most relevant to the COVID pandemic and what makes me more high risk, right?
Because of your situation and the vulnerability of your system to external attack, right?
Exactly that. So my immune system is already attacking itself. I don't need the help of a pathogen like COVID-19, right? So I'm high risk for that reason, but in a very interesting high risk category because it's one that has been completely forgotten by the powers that be in many ways, because we hear about high risk groups that are getting offered vaccinations first or being told to mask more, social distance more. And it's autoimmune patients are very rarely included in that conversation. It's either people who are actively on chemotherapy, which often includes autoimmune patients. For cancer, though, is really the indication, or people who are over 65. Now, I'm under 65, and I have an autoimmune condition, so already my immune system is under attack in some way because my body has reacted to the environment around me combined with my genetics and my lifestyle to kind of, decide from within to mutiny.
So what is your condition? What is it? How does it manifest, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So the autoimmune disease I have is called Hashimoto's disease or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Yeah. And this is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid, which is a tiny little gland in your neck, butterfly-shaped gland. And you would be surprised how many hormones and systems in the body this gland actually has an effect on. And when it malfunctions, when the body recognizes it as foreign tissue and attacks it, which is what happens in my case, it's essentially stripping me of all the hormones that the thyroid would be producing, creating an underactive thyroid or hypothyroidism. And so I have to, for probably the rest of my life, be on a thyroid replacement hormone, which is luckily very easy to access. I would say that a good 75% of people, just spitballing on the number here, who get diagnosed with this particular condition are prescribed a pharmaceutical and they're fine. I was in this smaller group that was diagnosed and took a while to be diagnosed, which is a whole story in and of itself. And it took me years to get better. And better is a relative term at this point, right? So it introduced me to an entire new world. It brought me into the world of chronic illness and disability. It led to me creating my podcast. And it gave me a really different perspective on the medical institutions that are active in my home country of the US, as well as in many other parts of the world. I want to talk about that because it's clearly something which is spreading,
but it's amazing how you mentioned this, and it's across the board with the human body and mind. Is when something isn't working, that's when you realize how much it does. And, maybe that's sort of a point which reflects in things as well, when people are just sort of mindlessly saying, everything's fine. But when like a pandemic, which of course is a pretty big, thing going against the fine, people are like, whoa, wait a second, there's a world, they kind of, I feel, the point I'm trying to get to is you have certain indicators, certain wake-up calls, certain things that go, hey, there's something wrong with the way you're doing things, whether on an individual level, if it's your lifestyle, if it's your diet, if it's the way you're thinking. There are things that pop up, whether it's anxiety, which tells you, hey, you may be pushing too hard, or if you're excessively eating or drinking, the body reacts. And on a larger social scale, we've just been mindless consumers. We've been mindless, sort of chasing money and the material. We've been exploiting and just sort of not being nice to each other. I'm saying nice on a very fundamental level, at any cost, trying to get the upper hand. And maybe and clearly we had something wrong when you need such a big wake-up call to realize that there's something wrong,
There's so much in what you're talking about there. I mean, at very base level, I think it's patriarchy and capitalism, right? Like these are and white supremacy in my part of the world, right? Where there are these, and at certain points in history in your part of the world too, where there are these larger structural and systemic narratives that have been shaping us culturally. And I think that a lot of that is at the base of the lifestyle choices that we've made, and also our reaction to this pandemic, right? And our various political systems and how they have reacted and sort of absorbed the message of this global pandemic too. But I really have come to believe that those of us who are diagnosed with autoimmune disease specifically, which quite literally means a disease in which your immune system starts to attack some other part of your body, an organ, a system. It includes things like MS, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, eczema, but it also includes lupus, and it includes, it spans a wide breadth of diagnoses, and we're seeing these diagnoses on the rise massively, especially in the
Right.
last 20 years. And
So
I
is
believe
that
that we're the canaries in the coal mine. That's
right?
what
So
it
you
is.
see the increase, you say, right? I mean, I there's so much when it comes to, this conversation is just it's got so many things which I want to talk about. The one
This is what happens with us.
yeah, no, what I want to get is, you know okay, let's just talk about, two things you mentioned. One is the capitalist thing and the white supremacy, these angles. There's this thing I feel as an outsider, as a spectator, is, again, Indians, and I speak as an Indian, is I hear a lot of people appropriating American culture, and that's been a part of us for years. Whether it's, I want a can of Coke, or I want a burger, I want a sandwich, or I want to watch, Friends, or whatever the shows have been from Hollywood, to the cultural stuff that we really sort of aspire to adopt, which is not always healthy, but what happens. Um, when you look at American sort of dialogue right now, it's very sort of violent in its nature when it comes to them versus us, right? If the blacks feel that it's time for them to get some sense of justice. Of course, I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong, but I just get a sense of this. There seems to be a lot more of this religion or that religion, right? Like the Islam or it's Christianity. Like the idea of America being a melting pot for all of different kinds of rich ideas, different kinds of rich people when it comes to their rich heritage or whatever it may be. Yeah, maybe, of course, the white predominant culture did dictate terms of how people should live. But from when I lived there in 2003 to 4, I'm not saying it was all right, but I'm saying my experience there, to what I'm sensing now is a lot more anger. It's almost like a country that had its, had its time to sort of get things right, but it's just sort of led to this damage, which seems, I wouldn't say irreparable, but it just seems like, if you want to use it as like that analogy of a family, it's like this family which was really, really well to do, really, really sort of from the outside seemed like a great family to aspire to be. But clearly there were some major problems which they didn't work on. And as a result, now they're just this torn family that hates each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It just
we're
looks
a
like that.
totally dysfunctional family,
Yeah. And
and a blended family, and one that refuses to understand one another, and
yeah,
intergenerationally, as well as interculturally in many ways too. And I
yeah.
think this idea of the American dream and the melting pot that people have always seen America as is
Mm,
something that we are seeing through now, in the
yeah.
sense that the veil's been lifted. We're beginning to see more obviously, for those of us who perhaps have not been in the know. Like, I'm someone who's lived with white privilege my entire life, right? And as such, I was not nearly as aware of the depth of racial disparity and internalized racism that I carry, and that people that I affiliate with also carry.
Mm,
And that learning curve has been very steep, especially over the last few years. But I think a lot of it is because we are reacting to these systems. Finally, it's sort of
mm.
reached a boiling point, and you wonder why so many of us are getting sick,
Yeah.
because there's so much additional stress. And then we have globalized stress when it comes to things like this pandemic, and some of the horrific events that have happened even over the last month,
Mm.
between the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan and the
Taking back
earthquake in
Afghanistan.
Haiti.
people
Yeah,
people
yeah,
say it
taking
like
back. Yes, you're
people
right.
say it
You're
like
right.
they came from China and took over. No, no,
No,
they were
no,
there.
they're taking back. Yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
with them seizing power, right? And
Yeah, I
so
mean,
that
it's
happening
crazy.
in Afghanistan, and the earthquakes in Haiti. I mean, I remember there was like 1 week only a few weeks ago where it was like Haiti, Afghanistan, and then
Yeah.
the abortion ban in Texas. And I was done. I was numb.
It
I
was
was
like
done.
they call it this initiate. When I went to university in the UK, they had the first week called Hell Week, like initiation week, where you have to do like 30 activities. So it's pretty much Hell Week
Yeah.
on Earth. Yeah, the
Yeah.
terrible. No, but I'm sorry. I'm going to say something which might not be popular sentiment, but this thing you mentioned about white privilege, right? I don't see it as a bad thing entirely. And let me explain why. Because privilege in itself, people are using it like it's a curse, right? Like you have privilege. I think sadly or unfortunately, whatever it may be, privilege is something you're born with, right? You're born into a certain society, into a certain group, into a certain whatever race you want to call it. It's what you do with it, I think, is more important. And when you say white privilege, I think a lot of people use it as something to lean on when their argument isn't strong, right? Like what I'm saying is, instead of figuring out their stuff, they point at white privilege, or in India, maybe whatever the word is. I'm saying it's not always bad, because there are a lot of white people across the world who might have used that privilege to do so much good for people, right? Like, say, for instance, like Mother Teresa. She was a white woman who came to India, and yes, was she white privileged? I don't know. I never met her parents or her. She's a little older than me, but she's
Just a
done
little.
so much with it, right? Like, I'm not saying, of course, people are, but she was a Christian, tried to convert people. I'm like, dude, you'll always find something. But my point is, there are so many people who've either explored, they've found people, they've helped people. So I think we shouldn't take away from that, is what I'm getting at. And that also leads to this point of the stress and the illness and the sickness in the world. And of course, across the board, across India, across America, now you have people who are stressed, who are at a younger age developing chronic illness, developing massive stress related issues, depression, anxiety. And this leads me to that point, which comes back to white privilege, which people now are using different terms, different things to sort of, okay, this is the thing which gets a little confusing for me. When I feel this is a sense, and I'm not saying that I'm right and my disability or my eye condition is more of a problem in society, but I feel when there's so much of this thing where people are so scared and they're so confused with what they've been told, there's this inherent thing to, one is to blame one group or the infrastructure or the establishment. The other thing is to almost say, but look at me, I'm struggling, right? And this could be across the board, and again, nothing's right or wrong, but you get the sense that more and more people, because you host this podcast, of course, a lot of people there are genuinely overcoming a lot on a daily basis just to live a healthy and, as you said, relatively better life. But I'm sure you've heard these narratives where a lot of people, at the drop of a hat, feel offended, feel like they're the victims. Do you get a sense of that?
No, not among the people I speak to, which is kind of
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of that is relative too.
Yeah.
I think you have to look at individual experiences through a cultural lens.
Mm.
And I agree with the point you make, that white privilege, the idea of white privilege does not inherently mean that every white person is a bad person.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the idea that's being espoused here, especially in a lot of what we've been experiencing here in the States with Black Lives Matter protests, particularly over the last year after the death of, or murder, I should say, of George Floyd.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is understanding that the system that we set ourselves up with is failing us. It has been failing us from the beginning. It's been working for one group of people, and they're not even the majority. So that this structure, which includes capitalism, white supremacy, the patriarchy, right, that's failing us, and we're getting sick, we're getting angry, we're more divided than ever, and that these divisions are fueled, of course, more and more by those who recognize that the more far we are apart, the easier it is to tear us all down.
Yeah.
So it's the
It's a divide
undermining
and
of
rule
democracy.
kind of sentiment,
Absolutely. And I truly believe that it's very much the ethos of the conservative right here in the US. And it's something that has been continually espoused by our former president, whose name shall not be mentioned, because in my mind, it
Mr.
doesn't
Frumpy.
deserve more airtime. Mr. Frumpy, the dumpster fire himself. But I think.
So I'm assuming you're a Democrat.
Really? Are you? I mean, honestly, my political beliefs, I would say, are even further left of the Democratic Party. They're much more, along the lines of the Green Party or,
because clearly, from what I can tell,
or something.
The Democrats aren't really having a good time right now either.
They're not. I mean, I actually would align myself more with democratic socialism, which is another one that people get very confused about.
Left. Okay, right.
I'm even further left. But saying that, I also recognize that I benefit from so many different systems that should a democratic socialist model come into play politically here in this country, I'd probably be pretty pissed about some shit.
I don't think
and it
any
would be an
system is
adjustment
perfect.
period.
I don't think anything is
I don't either.
When
but
you
I
have
do
more
think
than
democracy,
one person or four people, or maybe even one person and two people in a room, they're going to have something which is not going to work for them. So, and I don't even think if you ask an individual in America, what is the perfect thing for you? I don't think anyone knows. I don't think any human knows that in that much certainty. So that's where the scope for exploitation
No.
and the scope for like uncertainty comes, which is great because you as a person, I as a person are changing every day. And if we are more rigid with rigid with the way we look at that and more rigid to the idea of change, I think we become more and more stagnant. And I think that's what's happened is people across the globe, of course, I'm not pointing at America in this case, but the fact that people
Please do.
would no, the conversation is always the same, right? Like if I talk to my cousins, I talk to family, whatever in America, it just sounded like it's getting stagnant, like a country with so much potential, which also has showcased, it's just using it for the wrong things. It's the same thing. You see the gun violence. You hear the same story of like, oh, guns. I mean, do something about it, guys. You really have that much power within your society. I mean, you claim to be the most powerful country to the rest of the world. Why don't you show that within your country? Is what I get a sense of. Like, you have healthcare, you have the best doctors, then give it for free. I mean, set by example, give it for free. Don't point saying Iraq needs healthcare. I mean, fucking sort out your healthcare, right? It just sounds
I completely
stupid.
agree. Yeah. I mean, our healthcare system is like that. That is a disaster in and of itself. But
oh my God, I ran away when I saw my medical bill. I'm like, are you crazy for an ultrasound?
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. And that's, I mean, it is a symptom of capitalism, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, when doctors are so good and you have the best equipment, the best technology companies making that equipment, but then you have these idiots like lawyers and insurance companies ruining it, there's clearly something wrong with the system, you know?
I think a lot of it comes down to individualism. That at the root of American democracy is this idea that we all have a right to, you know, the pursuit of happiness, and that we are encouraged to be very individual. And I think while that individualism is important,
wrong with, Lauren. You know, I really don't
there's
think
nothing wrong with it.
Which makes
but I think
each
what's
individual
happened,
unique. But it's the parameters
it's
that
wonderful.
Set. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's such a lovely idea. But what's happened is that people have decided that because individualism is such a core value in this country, somehow it's gotten butchered in or lost in translation over the last generation or so, where people have gotten to the point where they've decided that anything that they think has got to be better than what anyone else thinks. And that's where the problems happen.
And I think that's the idea, right? The pursuit of happiness is a collective sense, which is we can make sure that all of us have eat enough to think. But I think the problem with America, and I see this in India right now as well, with my perfect 2020 vision, is this pursuit of my happiness, pursuit of my needs, pursuit of my. It's become and as I said, and as you mentioned, individual is a great thing because we're all unique and we contribute to a larger sense of a better world. But if we always say it's my money, it's my house, it's my better car, it's my job, it's my appraisal, then they're all collectively fucked.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think there has to be, you've got to split the difference. It's somewhere in the middle where we can have a little bit of profit and a little bit of that's mine, but also a little bit of let's be contributing back to the communities that we're a part of. And what's so fascinating is that the people that I speak to day in and day out in the work that I do, which is particular to the chronic illness and disability community, are people who go through adverse experiences and then decide to turn their pain into an opportunity and give back to the community. It is unbelievable.
People like that are
unbelievable. But the fact that so many of them are doing it, I'm not having every single one of them on my show. I don't have enough time in the world to do that.
I'm sure.
But there are so many people who are doing it.
A lot of people, a lot of episodes out. So you probably get a better sense than I had the privilege of interviewing people for the Life Gone Wrong podcast, and that's where you and I were supposed to have our chat, but thanks Spotify,
Who needs them?
Yeah, who needs them? Exactly. I mean, it was great that we continued talking, and you get a sense, and I don't generalize, but there is a large percentage of people in some way or the other, whether it's physically contributing, volunteering, or in some shape or form. There's a large people giving more back in the disabled community. Because I think they get the sense that, you know what, we're all just in this sort of life. We've been thrown all these things at us. I mean, a lot of these things have been thrown at us. We've been thrown into things which we didn't ask for. But there's no point sitting and going, it's their fault, therefore we must complain. But let's do something which can make this experience, or for the similar experience for someone with my condition, a little easier. Like if I know someone who's got macular degeneration or Stargardt's disease, I'm like, here are 3-4 tips that make things just that much easier a little bit. And for you, through your podcast, sharing these ideas, sharing stories of chronic illness, and just sharing your story, you've made it easier. And if that, for the next person who comes along with a similar condition, which I think is beautiful, it's not like massive change that Lauren went and, created a country just for disabled people, which is not even realistic. But I think this is amazing what you're doing.
I mean, I am thinking of buying an island when I win the lotto, right? So that we can escape the regime
awesome.
that we keep experiencing over here. But that aside, I'll invite you. Don't worry. That aside, I really do think it's kind of amazing, and what makes this community so beautiful. I mean, absolutely. There are people in this community who get involved in what a good friend of mine likes to call symptom porn, where they, it's accurate. Like this idea of symptom porn. There are definitely going to be individuals who want to find a space where that's an echo chamber where they can shout about what they're upset about. And like, that's fine. If that's what you need, it's out there for you. But there's also another group of people who are in the disability community, or people who move from one group to the other sometimes, right? Who are in it to make waves, who are in it to create change because they don't want someone to have to go through what they've been through. And I think a lot of that it's because there are not a lot of there's not a lot of visibility, and there are not a lot of rights that are really protecting disabled people, whether that's inside the medical system or in the greater world, right? So bringing awareness is really important. And the whole reason that I use the term uninvisible, right, for the podcast is because I was dealing with an invisible diagnosis. You wouldn't look at me and go, she's got an autoimmune disease. She's high risk.
People want that, people want a visual cue of,
and that's their problem.
I'm saying, mine. People have said, you don't look blind or visually impaired. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like,
fuck you. Like, what does blind look like?
Exactly.
Like, I hate when people do that. This kind of generalization is,
but does it come I've even from had a sense of being told and being educated in that way? I mean, do you blame them, or do you think that they can make a little bit more of an effort in today's day and age with information out there?
I think we need more information on everything, but that's what's so great about digital media and like social media, right? Is that there are those of us like you and I who are out there having conversations that some other people aren't having, or that they're not having enough, or they're not screaming loud enough about. And also understanding that those conversations have to be intersectional. I think that's a really key part of the conversation, because while my focus is on invisible and chronic illness and disability and that identity, it's also about where do the other markers of my identity or parts of my identity that I recognize to be true for me and perhaps for others who are looking at my body and my person, where do those intersect with this chronic illness identity or this disability identity? Is it my sexuality? Is it my gender? Is it my race? Is it my religion? Is it the way I was raised? Is it my economic background? So all of these different markers that can also be attributed to how we see ourselves in the world. And then being able to practice activism, even in some small way, by sharing our stories so that other people know they're not alone, so that other people can see themselves reflected in these stories. And that's what creates community, and that is where we shift the focus. Interestingly, using individual stories, we shift the focus from individuals to a greater community. And that's what I think is really exciting.
No, that's really well said. I think there are two things I'd like to talk about. I think you mentioned this identity thing. And I think what sadly happens, and when I mean sadly, I mean in isolation, people look at an activist as just the vegan or the animal rights. And great, that's the work they really want to show light on and get certain wrongs addressed in that space. I understand. But people tend to then forget that that person has an entire 99,000 other things that go into making him or her or them or whatever the pronoun. I'm really not in sync with it right now. But
you used all of the pronouns there, I think.
I just say person. I don't think there's anything wrong with person.
We're all humans. That's all we've got.
Are we? I don't know. I think that might change soon.
Yeah, that might also change soon. We're working on it.
But I feel people, and I feel sometimes even the activists themselves just take themselves so seriously with the cause that they forget that you aren't. I mean, you are a vegan because you eat vegan food, but there are so many other things that go into making you're scared of birds. You like eating with cutlery. You like taking naps. There's so many things that go into making you. And that sort of leads into my other thing, which I have a problem with, is when you say with this digital era where people can access information, why would a normal, so-called normal gal want to be like, I want to listen about disability? Because the thing for them, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think I can because it's my podcast.
Yep.
What I feel is, unless something is glorified on Netflix, like a blind guy wins a race, or a lady with a chronic illness goes and becomes a single mom, or goes and becomes a CEO, once it's made dramatic, people are like, oh, I think that story about disability is great. But what I love about your podcast is it's real conversations. It's about all aspects of the person's life. It's the ups, it's the downs. It's not the exaggerated wins. It's not only being celebrated, but it's just about living and taking away from what people can teach by just living. But do you think that slowly people will be interested in that? And just from your listeners, what is the kind of approach to that nowadays?
Yeah, so much in that. I
Just talk a lot.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm going to try to remember all of that and answer all of your questions all at once. But I think that the big thing here is, this idea of all of the things that make us who we are, right? And why would someone who is not disabled listen to my show? I'll tell you why. Because one day they will need to use the medical system in a similar way to someone who is relying on it, who's perhaps younger than them. Or they know someone. Why would you listen to a show about MS? Well, because you probably know someone with MS, or maybe you've got a genetic risk factor for MS, right, or whatever it is, right? So, and I believe that, like, this is the idea of the ripple effect, right? Like, if one person is like, this is relevant to me, they'll tell the next person, and that person will tell the next person, and hopefully it ripples out. And I think we also have to understand how fragile we are. I think part of the concept with the show is not to encourage us to live in fear and, worry about getting diagnosed with something. But the point is, we're all going to die somehow. We're all going to get sick and die somehow. And I think it's understanding that there are those of us who perhaps have greater need of things like the medical system right now, and that we have to have a stake in trying to improve things for everyone.
There needs to be more dignity, I think, for starters, across the board, across countries in the health system, right? You need more dignity. That's one thing we can have, right? We might not have the best medical system, but dignity in treating lives, I think, is something which is very important.
So important. And I think understanding that, like, I don't want to sound like a downer when I say this, because I don't mean it as a down thing, but that, our mortality is around the corner. It's around the corner all the time.
It's the only certain thing in life.
It's that and taxes, right? Death and taxes. And which ties us back to capitalism. But, and community, actually. But I think the thing about that is that, since that is such a certainty, rather than trying to cheat it, what we need to do is try to live our lives as well as we can. And if we're finding that there are numerous environmental factors, or lifestyle factors that are beginning to influence a large group of people. Now, interestingly, when it comes to autoimmune disease, because this is the thing that I'm particularly obsessed with, 80% of people who live with autoimmune disease are women or identify as female. And that being the case, to me, what that shows is how wrong the patriarchy is in dictating lifestyle, because 80% of the people.
So why do they break out? Why do these things? Not these things. Why do these disorders occur in the first place? Is it?
We don't know.
Okay.
What we do think is that it's a combination of lifestyle, environment, and genetic predisposition, and that any certain percentage of these three factors can contribute in some way to a diagnosis happening. Now, nobody else in my family, as far as I know, has this same autoimmune disease that I have. But there are other people in my family who have thyroid disorders, right? Not the same one, but sort of similar. And there are other autoimmune diseases, perhaps in the family, but not necessarily this particular one. So there's potentially a genetic factor at play there for me. I grew up in the 80s thinking pasta was a complete meal and eating takeout a lot. And, so certainly my lifestyle influenced the the occurrence of inflammation in my body, which eventually led to this diagnosis. But I also
Yeah.
think the biggest factor here is stress. And we're all dealing constantly with psychic stress, with emotional stress. This pandemic, it's causing more trauma for us than I think we're willing to accept in many ways.
I feel it's because you're forced to look at your situation that I mean, not you, I'm saying generally people are feeling, oh my God, I have to actually sit with my emotions and what I'm feeling for a change. Otherwise, I'm like, you know what? I need to go to work. I need to catch an Uber. I need to go to the office. I need to worry about my meetings. I need to get my. So all that clutter, that distraction suddenly is like, wait a second. You want me to think about what I'm feeling? I'm not comfortable with that. But hey, you better do that for 20 months, and that's what I think has resulted in this, which I think needed to be done many years back for a lot of us.
I also think a lot of that, what happens in this rat race is that we lose connection with our bodies.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I mean, for
when
me, it was
that
the biggest wake up
happens,
call 2020. I was just mindlessly getting hammered in the name of doing comedy nights, comedy shows, just going out there. The conversations are all about outcome, why I'm not on Netflix, why someone else is on Netflix, as opposed to doing comedy because I love making people laugh and I love the sound of laughter and I love the fact that what I have to say is funny. That became
yeah.
like the least most important reason I went out. And I was like, if this is the thing, then there's something clearly wrong with the people I'm hanging out with, the shows I'm doing, or reason why I'm doing these shows. And the reason why I'm even calling myself a comedian. So that
You are a comedian. Yeah.
I
Like,
am,
what do you mean
but
so-called?
yeah. I mean, then again, right? You get so caught up with a comedian should have 10 things. They should have a Netflix special. They should have an agent. They should have a manager. They should have at least 10,000 people at each show. As opposed to what should a comedian essentially and fundamentally be? Funny. You forget about that, sometimes.
Yeah.
And
And I think there's been this return to joy in all of
yeah,
that too,
yeah.
right? Like people are leaving corporate jobs at record rates because people have started realizing that they need to give a shit about themselves more and not be
Yeah,
working
that's
for
really
someone else's
sad.
dream.
That in America,
Yeah.
someone told me this, that I have to have a job, otherwise, what about my health insurance? I'm like, you're working literally
Yep.
to stay alive in case something goes wrong. That's how
Yep.
fucked up is
You're
that?
working yourself to death in order
Yeah,
to stay alive.
yeah.
It's such a
That's
catch
even
22.
better put. That's even better put because that's literally what the job is doing to you. You're getting stressed because of
Yeah.
work or because someone at work is making more money or has a better car. But you have to keep that job because in case you fall ill, which you are falling ill because of that stress. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite beautiful in its intricacy, if I might say so
Yeah, but
myself.
it's also like we've been duped. Like it's
It's a total
intricate
lie, right?
and
Yeah, yeah.
it's such a lie, that I mean, it's interesting. I was watching a video that someone I follow on Instagram made the other day that was basically like, money's not real, that we've put an arbitrary value on this paper shit.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. If you decided this wasn't worth anything, you could cut it up, you could toss it out, it wouldn't matter. And that we've
And you most
chosen
likely
to put
wouldn't touch it
value.
because it's dirty.
Right. And so that we've chosen to put value on arbitrary concepts in many ways, right? Like this is
Yeah.
like the very meta part of the conversation, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but what
I mean, if you
this,
ask someone like Chappelle, he'd be like, "We are putting value on white faces because that's
yeah, also true. And like we
Yeah.
can't even get Harriet Tubman on a piece of currency, like and I think it's that the pandemic, this is where the pandemic has been an opportunity. It has been an absolute tragedy, but it has been an opportunity for us to look within and realize where there's room for improvement.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that a lot of people are coming to is that where there's room for improvement is in increasing joy and in reconnecting to self and reconnecting self to the world, whether that means travel for some or more vacation time for others or starting your own business because you've got a passion that you've never pursued. And I think we're also realizing that life is short and that we need to do the things that we're passionate about and not sit on our projects and ideas and wait on them. That like now is the time to act because there never is a right time to do anything. You're never going to be ready.
And there's always no point planning all the time because what are you planning for, right?
Right. Because there could be an earthquake tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have these massive fires here in California that are wiping out,
Man,
I mean,
it's
huge
crazy. I saw
swaths of
something about
land.
a massive sequoia. I think the oldest or the
Yeah.
biggest sequoia being covered in aluminum. And I think, I don't know what happened after. But No,
They're
and I
trying to
think
save them.
they're trying to save them. No, I think what's beautiful about it is people are doing this, what you said. I think one step further is there's some people who are saying, you know what, I want to actually look at the self and how it was told to me that a self should be, which is all these check boxes, all these parameters to live for others, to live for outcome achievement, and to be a perfect model of society where people are like, look at him, look at her, how they worked and got all the things. They did a good job at school, they got a university degree, they got a PhD, they got a job, they got a wife, they got a husband, they got a family, they have the
This
right
person is
kids.
much more successful than me. I don't
Sorry?
like this person right now. It's much more
Yeah,
successful than me.
that seems the case, but
Yeah.
that person suddenly then has done everything that society or whatever the voice of society, whether it's family or whether it's whoever it may be, right? The mentors or maybe the institutions. And that's a weird thing. None of these things, corporations, none of these things like the family itself doesn't have an official voice. These are all individuals who collectively make this larger voice, which is not really the voice of an individual, tells this person get all these things. And suddenly that person wakes up after retirement at 60 going, I haven't lived, you know? So
Yeah.
I get this sense that people are also doing that, where they're like, why am I doing this? And while it may be the passion and they have opportunities to pursue it and say, you know what, screw this 9 to 5, whatever the case may be, I'm going to do it. But I think, at least from what I feel has happened to me, there's this larger question of why do I want to do what I'm doing, or why do I want to do what I want to do? And I think that is a beautiful place to be, because as individuals more and more feel that, I think collectively the curiosity will be, why are we doing any of these things? Why are we eating 10 meals a day? Why are we just, consuming crap or putting out crap there? So I hope that, and I think conversations like what you're having on your podcast also trigger the why in life, which is not an easy question and makes people uncomfortable. And,
Not.
you know,
It's
but
not
I
an easy
think,
question at all, but I think it comes down to joy.
yeah.
I think we as human beings have a capacity for intellect,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's what sets us apart from other mammals, and among other things, like,
Yeah.
some opposable thumbs. But that I think a lot of people think it like, yeah, it's related to love, but I also think joy is, at when you talk to people in the spiritual and wellness world, they talk about love, but they also mean joy. I think that
Yeah.
they're sort of synonymous in a way, that I think it's about having experiences that light you up. And there's a question I ask everyone at the end of my show, which is, what lights you up?
Mm.
What are you unwilling to compromise on in your life? Because, like, what if you've had to stop eating cookies because you can't eat refined sugar anymore because it makes you flare,
Yeah. Yeah.
So how are you finding joy? Like, are you still going to eat the cookie sometimes? And what I love is that people do eat the cookie sometimes. They
Yeah.
have it anyway, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when you experience illness, when you lose control of your body, or when you feel like your body is really just deciding to work against you from the inside out, it's like a
Mm.
literal inside job and it ain't working.
Yeah.
When that happens to you, when you lose control of your faculties, you begin to realize what was important in the first place. And so it's
Yeah.
actually a gift. Like, that was the thing that happened to me. I was working myself into the ground. I didn't have boundaries. I wasn't having a ton of joy. It was sort of artificial joy. It was moments that felt like they were joyful, but when I look back on them, I feel so sad for myself.
So
I
this is
wasn't
before the
sleeping
podcast,
enough.
before you're doing
This
what
was,
you're doing now?
yeah, this was
Okay.
before this was as I was, like, right before I got sick, and getting sick was the thing that sort of led me to the podcast, just
Oh,
because
so
it
you've
was in my
had
wheelhouse.
this. So since when have you? Now, I want to talk about that as well. Before what you
Yeah.
said before this about this whole idea of when your own body is your first
Enemy.
enemy, yeah, first line of attack. It's a very interesting way that you're looking at life. But before that, before you talk about this, can you just tell me when it happened and sort of
Yeah, the
what you were doing at that
timeline.
time?
Yeah. So, okay. This was about 5 years ago,
Okay.
4 or 5 years ago. I was working full time in business management, and I had
Okay.
transitioned from a career as a full time actor, doing this
Oh, okay.
job. yeah, and this was a really big deal because it was a big career change for me. And when I say full-time actor, I mean full-time retail. Part-time actor, full-time retail, right? So I'd
So
made
stay
this
like theater
transition into
acting, or
business.
were you in Hollywood, like in that space?
I was living in LA, but I
Ah,
had trained in the UK. So
okay.
like I'd gone to school in London and had a classical theater training, you know.
I didn't know about this.
Um,
Okay, this is interesting.
Surprise.
On episode 2 with Lauren Freedman, how to get into
Yeah.
Hollywood.
Don't ask me that because I don't know.
Just take a left
But
after the third exit.
yes, something like that, the 101 to the 405.
Yeah.
So basically I had made this career shift and I was quite excited because I was like, cool, this is like, I'm finally being a grown-up and like doing grown-up things and having a regular job.
Yeah.
And then I got sick about a year and a half, 2 years into the job, and
Until then, you were
just couldn't show
absolutely
up.
fine, like no health
I mean,
related
was
issues.
I? As a teenager, I'd been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and my parents were always very supportive and
Hmm.
very positive when it came to talking about mental health and making it a priority in one's life.
Hmm.
So that was a great lesson to learn early on. Right after 9/11, my coping mechanism was to develop OCD, obsessive compulsive
Mm.
disorder. So I'd had challenges with my mental health over the years.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that the physical health issues started kicking in. Now, I say
Okay.
that they started kicking in then, but actually, I think a lot of them had been happening for a long time. And
Mm.
I just couldn't hear what my body was trying to tell me. This is the other thing. When you get a pain in your knee, you can look at it and go, that sucks, I have a pain in my knee. Or you can look at it and go, thank you, body, for letting me know that there's something I need to fix so that I can make the pain go away. There are two ways
Yeah.
of seeing that thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really hard to get to that point. Like, don't get me wrong here.
Hmm.
That's not
Hmm.
the perspective I had right away. I spent a long time feeling really shitty about everything and feeling sorry for myself, but
Hmm.
eventually found a way to crawl out of
Yeah.
that sadness. And for me, that was through community. But because I am a voice actor and a stage and television film
Hmm.
actor, I had recording equipment at home, right? And when I got sick and didn't know what the hell was going on, I started reaching out on social media and saying to people like, this is what's happening with me. I think there's this thing and that thing. And I cannot tell you how many people, largely women, started coming out of the woodwork and saying to me too. I've had the
Mm.
thyroid health crisis. I've had a health crisis. One of my closest friends who I lived with her when we moved to Los Angeles. We lived together for a year.
Yeah.
She told me, and I had no idea that she had a genetic disorder, you
Mm.
know? So it's like people living with these invisible things. At the same time, I had also been writing about period equity and women's health and hygiene.
Yeah.
And I was already, you know, using my soapbox to address the fact that we weren't talking enough about our periods.
Yeah.
And then this chronic invisible illness stuff was happening. And I was like, we're not talking enough about our periods, but we're also not talking enough about all this other shit that's going on.
Mm.
And why continue to stigmatize it and feel shame about it when there are other people like us out there? Because that was the thing that made me feel the most validated, was hearing from other
Yeah.
people that they were also going through that. And I wanted to know more of these stories. And those were the conversations I was having. So I literally decided to hit record on them. And that's how the podcast was born about 3 years
Oh,
ago
that's
now.
amazing.
Yeah. So it's taken a while, you know,
Yeah.
but a relatively short period of time in the scheme of
Yeah, I think it's
chronic
really
illness.
great from, yeah. You know, the thing that gets me is all this you've mentioned, right? I think we had this sense, and I'm saying all of you, me, and all the people you mentioned included, had this sense of aspiring to society. And again, society, I don't know who the hell this person is, is,
How dare they?
yeah, how dare they? They have this set of standards, and they told you to be normal in all aspects, whether look
Mhm.
normal or look their sense of a good-looking normal person or a successful normal. So this normal is something which a lot of us would aspire to sort of achieve in the process, sort of, kind of putting our own inadequacies, insecurities, all these issues under the carpet. We brush it under the carpet, resulting in this idea of lack of self-worth. And just to give you context to my thing, is I did this where I aspired just to be normal. I did everything, did all the sports, despite like, look, I'm going to do it. And that looks as courage. It looks as something, I'm strong, I can do it. I can do things that are not easy for me to do, which I think is also a great thing, which is also a great attribute, is I think resilience and fighting for a better way of living your life. But if you're doing it because you want to achieve this normal that someone else has set for you. I think I did that for years, and then I would go out partying,
Doesn't work.
because I have to be like the normal people, my normal friends partying, and then that way I'll get laid. I would like this normal guy with a normal gal. 20 years of that, man, it shattered the fuck out of me.
It's
I wake up,
exhausting as fuck, isn't it?
yeah, I woke up one day, and not even, it didn't happen like slam me in the face, but I'm just one day sitting in the car, being, fortunately not driving, but being taken to the studio where I was doing my radio show. And I just start like sort of trembling, my eyes start watering. I'm like, my heart starts going up, like racing. I'm like, what the hell is happening to me? And then I'd heard about anxiety, this strange thing that's hitting human beings. And I'm like, but it can't be me. I've overcome an eye condition. And then I was like, shit, I have to make peace with that. I mean, the process started there, but multiple panic attacks, etc., etc. And then I still hear sometimes, did I attach too much to my eye condition? Am I living too much in the past? And then am I using that as a crutch? And then people will be like, why are you depressed? I mean, it happened to you 20 years back. Get over it. So I've heard it all. I'm not blaming anyone here. But then you realize, fuck all of them, with all due respect. But it literally is your way of looking at yourself, because if you don't love yourself or respect or think you are worth it, then you're not going to respect anything or anyone around you or in life. And when I had that realization, which happened not too long back, I think it gives
and
you
it's not
this sense.
foolproof either, right?
Not at all. You
It
go
like
back.
it doesn't always.
Yeah.
You fall back into old patterns, and like
Absolutely.
that's going to happen all the time. It's part of understanding that we're
But
always going to be
it's a
subject to
beautiful thing. My
change.
cousin told me this. If it happened 9 times out of 10 where you would snap at someone, or you would get aggressively drunk and say shit, but once you're in this place where you're aware of what you're feeling and why you're doing things, and if your self-worth starts slowly getting better, out of 9 times out of 10, then it slowly drops to 8 times out of 10. So you're doing two times out of 10, you're not doing it. And that's how it is. And I just want to say this because it really made a difference when I spoke to this lady. She sort of is a yoga practitioner. She's a person who teaches chakra healing in Goa. She sits there, and she had a lot of life-changing events that led to where she is today. But she said this really nice thing. The reason I bring it up is because she said anything in the body or the mind starts as a vibration. Now that vibration sort of builds up into a thought. A thought builds up into, and maybe I've skipped like 13,000 processes, but that's pretty much what I got from her. There's a vibration. It all starts with that. And when you mentioned about how things manifest later, with you just did life, you just did your business management job, you did your acting course, and hundreds of thousands of other people are just doing. And all those vibrations, which are negative in some case, which may not be the healthiest for you, they don't happen, oh, it's a bad vibration right now, I have fever in 2 hours. These things take time, and in my case, 20 years to realize that, shit, why am I aspiring to be this normal, which I can never be? And as a result, I'm crushing who I think I am and looking at myself as a worthless piece of shit,
Yeah, it's a really complicated one, right? Because our humanity is not simple, and we're constantly learning new things and adjusting behaviors, and curiosity is what gets us there. But I agree. It's like, I also didn't tell you, I forgot to tell you, I also have 2 sleep disorders that I've now been diagnosed with, which has been really fun from the normal perspective, because I can't tell you how many people have told me, but you can just make yourself a morning person. And I literally can't, because I literally have these disorders, right? But it's
so
the kind of thing.
You can't sleep, or you sleep excessively? What is the disorder? Sorry.
Well, it depends on the day, but I have these 2 disorders. One, no, it isn't always fixed, except the thing that is fixed is that I'm constantly tired. I'm constantly fatigued. And it's not like, oh yeah, I get tired too. It's not that. And don't say that to people who have sleep disorders.
People always want to chime in nowadays. Like, yeah, I'm disabled too,
Oh yeah. I'm real tired from work. Well, you know what? I'm tired from being awake. I'm not tired from work. I'm tired from being here. Okay?
It's such a level of tiredness that, but how do you tell someone? Because everyone now is like, no, you don't know. Like, I'll tell you about this after you tell me your thing, because someone said something really hilarious. I've done it on my special, but I need to tell you this to get your reaction. But please finish what you're saying.
Well, the short story is that I have obstructive sleep apnea, which means that I stop breathing in my sleep. right? So
Ooh,
I
oh
have to
God.
wear a machine over my head, which is super sexy. It's great for
Nice.
dating.
Nice. Yeah.
Although pandemic times have made it a breeze, right? But like it's this, I
Wait,
have
this
to
is
wear this whole
like a
headset.
machine that sort of pushes oxygen into your lungs? Is that the
Yes,
machine?
it's called a CPAP,
Right.
and it
I was
it
going to ask, is
pushes
it the CPAP?
oxygen so that, yes, so that I don't stop breathing in my sleep. So which can, if that happens, it can create major problems with your heart,
No,
essentially, your
so
heart and your lungs.
is it because I know a couple of people who've gone through this monitored sleep in the hospital overnight to see why it's happening.
I
A
did
friend of
that. It was
mine,
horrible.
horrible, right? I mean, because someone's watching
Horrible.
you sleep, or
It's not that so much as how clinical the whole thing is, because
ah,
how are you supposed to be able to sleep when you
mm,
have all these wires sticking out of you in an unfamiliar environment that's super sterile and cold, and
yeah,
there's nothing about it that induces sleepiness. So like
and
already
those
it's a
bright lights,
challenge to your
yeah,
rest, and there's bright lights everywhere. So I recently had one of those studies where I had to
right,
stay in the hospital overnight and have that horrible experience. And it was during the COVID pandemic too, so I was like even more scared of all the
yeah,
germs, right? And I, from that study, was diagnosed with something called idiopathic hypersomnia, which is a clinical diagnosis for
yeah.
just being really tired all the time.
Oh,
There's
okay.
no, like, sleep science is a relatively new science. So
Mm,
there's still so much that we have to learn. It used to be a branch of psychology,
mm,
interestingly, but now it is its own branch of medicine. And many people come from pulmonology, which is the study of the lungs, into
yeah.
sleep, rather than from psychology into sleep. But the two are very closely related, the psychology and the sleep pieces. But I've tried a bunch of different things, and I'm now on sort of the drugless interventions stage of trying to sort this out. But I'm
Yeah, I
sort
was
of
going to
coming
ask,
to
is
accept that,
cannabis or
like,
CBD or hemp going to help?
well, it makes you tired usually if you have it at higher doses. And my
Okay.
problem is less the needing to feel tired and
That's yeah.
more the needing to feel awake.
And rest
But
when you can feel tired. Yeah.
yeah, but I was, at one point prescribed a stimulant, and that made me have panic attacks that I haven't had in years. And
Oh God,
it
that's not fun.
yeah, and it made me paranoid and stuff. And like, realizing that it was having this psychological effect, I was like,
Mm,
cool, so we're not doing stimulants. So let's try something else.
yeah.
So really it's now about managing my lifestyle. And like when I need to take a nap, I need to take a fucking nap, you
Yeah, that's
know?
good. No, good naps are very
So,
good.
but you learn your sort of limits a little bit
Yeah, I
differently,
think
right?
medication is this thing which is it's coming to India. It's come to India where a lot of people. It's a school of thought in Europe, in America, where you just if you're not feeling good, just take a medicine. Like if you're not take an
Mm.
asprin, just pop an asprin, take an Advil. I'm like, no, you don't need medicine
How
if you have a
about change your
hangover.
life?
Yeah, or
If you
drink
feel
water if
shitty,
you have a
change your
hangover.
life.
I mean, I take
Yeah.
Advil, I know, but if it's really unbearable. But for everything and anything, or you have anxiety, take Cipralex. Of course, people who do need medication do take medication. Don't listen to Sandeep Rao on the SoapyRao shows. He said,
Well,
don't take medication.
some medication is great. Some of it isn't.
Absolutely,
And it
but not
really
for
depends on the
anything and everything.
person.
Yeah.
And
I
over
think
here, we
over
also have the
medication
issue with
causes a
drug
sick
pricing.
people.
Over medication absolutely causes sick people. I literally just this week aired an episode of my show where one of the people he was diagnosed with a terminal lung disease as a
Oh God.
result of chemotherapy treatment for cancer. It's like,
Oh God.
when things like that happen, look, it was important that he had the chemo,
Yeah, of course.
but some of these medications can have some really bad side effects. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that they're not life-saving drugs sometimes too, but you really have to do your research. We're
Yeah.
not encouraged to do independent research or to learn critical thinking, to
Hmm.
even, like, I mean, look at all this stuff about the COVID vaccines. If
Yeah,
I have to
it's a
field
strange
one
one.
more question about the efficacy and safety of these things when there are hundreds of studies that
One
prove the
second. So,
safety and
Lauren, can you take
efficacy.
the vaccine? Or
Yes. And in fact, I was encouraged to do so. And,
okay, great. Okay.
now we're looking at, do I need to take a booster shot? So I don't
So
know
you've got a
yet,
shot
but
done already? You've taken a shot?
I've had both. I've had both vaccines I had Moderna.
Oh, it's a
And
double dose vaccine like
yeah,
Covishield, like what I've taken here. Okay, okay.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, no, because it's some of these people, right? And I don't. It's sadly that they end up in the case of India, they end up living in Goa on the beach, and they kind of smoke pot. So people are like, oh, these hippies. I'm like, no, but
It sounds
and
like
they,
LA.
it sounds great, yeah. And they're the ones who are like these anti-vaccine people. I'm like, dude, it's and I spoke to this person about it. He said, see, we work with the data, and that's how vaccines are made. It's not that Bill Gates gave his semen and said, propagate this in the people, right? And I think he's got better shit, more money to make, right? Or to sort
Yeah.
out his marital status or his personal life to worry
Oh, who
about
knows?
infecting. Yeah. But it's so, I mean, I'm like, why does it have to be a big hoo-ha, right? Like the point is, we're not going to take it, sit in your forest, do what you have to, but don't come and threaten people who are vulnerable, who are older, who are,
This is my issue.
yeah.
This is my
No,
issue with
even with
it.
your case, you're not older or anything like that, but you are at risk when these morons are running around saying no vaccine without a mask, acting like fools, and they don't even stay away. They come
Yeah.
in your face. They're like, take a vaccine. I mean, I'm against. I'm like, dude, stop spraying that shit in my face, right?
I mean, that said, though,
Yeah.
like I've got friends whose systems are so sensitive that they can't be vaccinated. So the people who
Right.
are willingly unvaccinated,
Yeah.
because they think that they're going to get a tracker placed in their bloodstream if
I
they
mean,
get
honestly, I
the,
feel like telling them you're not
whatever
that
they believe.
important. You're really not that important for people to track you.
Yeah, but
Like,
they're
yeah.
right. But it's also like, excuse me, about whether or not they're going to get the vaccine based on their health, because some people could have their health adversely affected to the point of it not being worth getting a vaccine for them, right? But the people who
Absolutely.
are willingly choosing not to because they believe in conspiracy theories is like a different problem. And it connects back to this American individualism thing and this not listening to other people thing and this not being in community with other people thing. And then when you talk about the masking and the anti-maskers, just wear a fucking mask. I haven't got time for
God.
it anymore.
Yeah.
Just wear a mask.
And from all this you're telling me, it doesn't sound like individualism or any of these concepts. It just sounds like selfish people who are spoiled and going, I don't want to give up my gun. I don't want to wear a mask. Like, fuck you. Just sound like you sound like a
Well,
spoiled
yeah.
child. And
They're
you
not
want
thinking
to,
about their communities.
they're not thinking full stop. They're not thinking at all. They just are like, you know what? I'm American. And it's sad that it's American because I think there are some great American people, including you. I have some really, really good friends as well. And I think there's so many good Americans out there doing good work. You can't just generalize a country or a group. But I think when people are like, I'm American and I can do, I'm like, dude, shut up. It's not,
It's a bad look. It's a
yeah, and
bad
don't drop
look.
your country or the people who are so many good people out there, like India. Like when you see some moronic Indians saying things like, I'm Indian and Muslims are bad, or I'm Indian and Pakistan. Like, shut up, dude. Don't speak for all of us because you're a fool. You know what I mean? And
But
this
it's
is the
also a
case.
fool who believes that that one person speaks for everyone.
Yeah,
It goes both
absolutely.
ways.
Absolutely. I think it's the receptor and the disseminator. But
Yeah.
I just had to use those big
But
words.
that's critical thinking. Yeah. But that's what critical thinking looks like, right? It's being able to look at that and go, well, look, that person doesn't represent everyone.
Absolutely. But when more and more people start spouting that same rubbish, people are like, am I the wrong one? And it takes a lot of I wouldn't say courage, but it takes some thinking and it takes some balls, or whatever your choice of appendage is.
Ovaries for me, ovaries.
To say, you know what? They might think that, and anything like whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's releasing a show in a different format. Well, everyone might be doing a web series, but everyone may be doing this sport. But I'm going to sit this one out. I think that takes a lot.
Saying no is
Yeah,
one of the most powerful things that I have learned in the last few years.
man,
Is
I'm
the
happy for
power
you.
of that complete sentence. That NO is a complete sentence. I say that in conversation, like, but in practice it's hard. I have to challenge myself a lot, but
Yeah,
especially as a woman, because I've been conditioned to say yes to everything and roll over,
right.
but this idea of saying no and preserving one's energy, which becomes so much more precious when you have less of it because you're chronically ill, that learning curve for me has been one of the most valuable in this experience of like losing my health and fighting my way back to it. That sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is not go to that party or not listen to the person who thinks not wearing a mask is a great idea, or
absolutely.
like whatever it is for you, but like, or like not take that business deal because it's actually going to be too much work for you, or like not encourage that person's destructive behavior, whatever it is, not encourage your own destructive behavior.
Don't take those inputs which you don't need. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's about like being more selective about where we put our energies, being more intentional about where we're using our energies. And that's what real self-care looks like to me.
We don't have to walk 50 kilometers or 5 kilometers every morning to get fresh water. So the fact is we have an opposite problem where we have too much to select from. And I think this thing
not everyone has that problem. It's a great problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. I think a lot of people have, I think, other much more severe problems. But I'm saying this thing of saying no, for people who have this issue of trying to please, constantly be validated by pleasing, I think it's a very, very powerful tool. And while you are saying no to a lot of things, I'm glad you said yes to being on this podcast, Lauren. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank
Yeah,
you
did that.
for inviting me on.
No, but honestly, I'm not going to patronize you by saying things because I know, and more importantly, the great work you're doing. So, um, all the best with everything going forward. I really hope, I don't know if it's a fantastical claim, but I really hope that you find a space of within, your life, which is comfortable, which is not constantly going to the doctor. I hope you find a good space. And if you're already
Thank
there, I hope
you.
that continues. And
I'm nearly there, man. I'm so
amazing.
close right now. I'm so close. So
And
yeah, we're
yeah,
getting there.
that's amazing to hear. And keep up the great work and keep up your
Thank
amazing
you.
attitude. And again, on behalf of all my listeners, thanks for being on the episode.
Oh, it's always such a joy to talk to you, Sandeep. And I feel like when I have these conversations, first of all, when you start podcasting, you lose the ability to not have a deep conversation, right? Like we don't do
Yeah,
small talk anymore.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
when you and I met, we were like straight in.
Yeah, I was
But
like, wow, I just heard about this person from, and it wasn't like a mutual friend, anyone. I think someone,
it was through Diversability.
yeah, a Facebook page. I think, who's the person who posted? I was supposed
Tiffany
to,
Yu,
yes, Tiffany Yu.
who's
And
also an amazing advocate in this
she seems
community.
amazing because her
Yeah.
story and what she's going through right now, I think it was at the time of the shootings in Atlanta. So she was pretty shaken up and she couldn't talk. So she said, I'm going to introduce you to some other people I'm a part of, in the group I'm a part of. And then you emailed me and I was like, okay, let's get on a call. And next thing I was like, wow, it's so nice to connect, literally connect. I'm not saying over a Zoom call, but connect on a much more
Deeper level.
deeper level with someone I just spoke to. And for people who haven't had the chance to hear your podcast or follow, if they want to follow the work that you do, where can they check out the podcast or your profiles? Can you just drop
Oh,
that on
thank
this?
you. That's very kind of you. So I'm across social media at Uninvisible Pod.
Okay.
And my website is uninvisiblepod.com. So you can find me all over the place with that stuff.
Fantastic.
And
I'll
there
drop it
will
in the
be an
description.
episode. Yeah, thank you. And there will be an episode coming up featuring your favorite host of this show, SoapyRao. So Sandeep will be on the show soon, where I'm waiting to schedule it because I had to say no to a whole bunch of interviews and cancel a whole bunch of them because I had a health crisis earlier this year and I had to focus on healing. And
Okay.
so
But you're better
waiting for the
now, as you
schedule.
said.
A lot better now.
Ah, that's
And
good.
I mean, do you know what I think it is? I think it's like waking up every day and choosing to keep healing. And like
That's
some days
nice.
you lean into it, some days I lean into it and I wake up because I'm like, I just can't today, I'm too tired, and I just
Yeah.
sleep and I rest and I do what I have to do.
Yeah.
I also recognize that I've been able to set myself up with a certain amount of comfort in my lifestyle, right? And
That's great.
that's my great fortune, right? Is that I have that flexibility, but
Mm,
I know that not everyone has that, and that's why these stories are more important than ever to me, to be able
absolutely.
to remind people that they are not alone. And it's not just about this disability and chronic illness shit. It's also about a lot of other shit. So,
Yeah. There's a lot of
um,
shit to choose from in today's day and age. I'm glad that we have so much, a
yeah,
bouquet of shit.
yeah. Like we have a few volumes to choose from, I
Yeah.
think, at this
Yeah.
point. It's like Encyclopedia Britannica 2021.
Absolutely. Different shapes and
Um,
sizes, flavors, whatever you want, we have it. It's a rich
yes,
world we live in.
exactly.
But it's
Yeah.
amazing to
But
hear.
truly, yeah, thank you for having
And
me
I think
on.
healing's such a great thing, and I just want to say,
Yeah.
just remember the vibrations. It all starts there. It doesn't have to happen today or tomorrow, but it starts with the intent. If those vibrations are good, or if they're healthy for you, I think you just have to sit back and enjoy the ride.
I think you need to play us out with Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys.
I don't. This is a privately done podcast. I don't have copyright to playing the Beach
We don't have
Boys.
the rights. We don't have the rights, but
Well, I can
if we
get a cover
could,
made by a friend of mine called Bitch Boys, and we can go out on that note.
perfect. Or we could sing a little for them.
Let's do that, Lauren. I'll leave it to the actor to do it, not.
Don't leave it to me.
But thank you
But
so
no,
much.
truly, it's such an honor to chat with you as always, and like just to share energy with you, because like it's not always easy every day to wake up and do this work, but having
Mhm.
these conversations with people who remind you how important this work is extremely validating, and it reinforces, continuing to focus on the good stuff and to like
Yeah.
be the good person you want to be every day when you wake up, because you have a new opportunity to be you every day. So Yeah,
Hey,
thank
that's
you
amazing.
for
Thank you for
that.
those kind words. And anytime you feel anything, just I'm always here. Just if you need a reminder, don't go on social
You're
media.
such a
Just message me.
sweetheart.
But
He's the
thank you.
best. You guys should all be friends with Sandeep.
No, I'm just about 5 left on my Facebook. No.
Well, this is so I'm trying to set you up so you can start saying no a lot more.
Oh yeah, that's no. Yeah, that's I don't think I've reached that place yet where I can say no, but I think I can say maybe, which is not bad. I think it's not bad yet. But Lauren, appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandeep. It's been such a pleasure, and I can't wait to chat again soon.
Talk soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.